The roar of the engine came first, a deep, angry gurgle that cut through the hum of Akani city traffic. Chidinma Okoro heard it and instinctively flattened herself against the concrete wall of the Echo Pearl Tower. The rainy season had turned the city's roads into a treacherous soup of red-brown mud and overflowing gutters. She was on the last leg of her journey, her cleaner's uniform, a crisp, practical beige, still miraculously spotless. Then came the flash of white. A massive G-Wagon, the color of bleached bone, veered sharply towards the curb. The turn was too deliberate, too precise. For a split second, Chidinma saw the driver's profile through the tinted glass. A woman with a severe, elegant silhouette, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. The truck's tires hit the deep pool of muddy water with explosive force. A tidal wave of filth erupted from the street, crashing over the young woman in a cold, heavy sheet. The shock of it stole her breath. Thick, gritty water soaked her from head to toe, plastering her hair to her scalp. The beige uniform was now a ruin of dark, stinking splotches. The vehicle didn't slow down. It accelerated, its powerful engine a triumphant snarl as it merged back into traffic and disappeared. Chidinma stood frozen, mud dripping from her chin. The roar of the city rushed back in, but it sounded distant, muffled. She looked down at herself, at the ruin of her attire. A fresh wave of cold washed over her, and it had nothing to do with the water. This was her only one. A replacement cost 100,000 naira. That was more than a week's wages, money for Emeka's medicine. A security guard at the tower entrance whistled. That was Wicked-O. She didn't respond. She couldn't. The sting of the humiliation was sharp, but the icy grip of panic was sharper. The cleaner squeezed her eyes shut, trying to force back the hot pressure building behind them. Fretting wouldn't clean it. Inside the white G-Wagon, Folake Bankole ended her call with a sharp tap of her thumb. Incompetent, she muttered to the empty, leather-scented air. All of them. The mogul glanced in the rearview mirror, not at the road behind her, but at her own reflection. Her makeup was flawless. Her diamond earrings caught the light. She had no memory of the person she had just drenched. They were a part of the landscape, an insignificant detail in a frustrating morning. Her focus was entirely on her destination, the Umoja Foundation headquarters. Her final push for the Humanitarian of the Year award? The prize was everything. It was the key to true immortality. The final gleaming piece of the legacy she had bled for. She took a deep, cleansing breath, pushing the irritation from her mind. Amara, the businesswoman said to her hands-free system. Yes, ma'am. Her assistant's voice crackled through the speakers. Confirm my 3 o'clock with the minister is still on. And send a basket of those ridiculously expensive orchids to Dr. Sanusi's office. A personal note. In anticipation of a fruitful partnership. Understood? Yes, ma'am. Right away. Folake allowed herself a small, controlled smile. The day was back on track. Not 50 meters behind where the G-Wagon had been, another car sat parked at the curb, engine idling. It was an older model Mercedes, black and unassuming, its polished surface reflecting the gray sky. Inside, Dr. Adebayo Sanusi sat perfectly still in the back seat. He had seen the whole thing. The white truck, the deliberate swerve, the girl in the beige uniform disappearing in a spray of grime. He watched as she stood there, dripping and stunned, a small, solitary figure against the city's relentless motion. The chairman slowly took off his old-fashioned spectacles and began to polish them with a silk cloth from his pocket. His driver, Jide, a man who had been with him for 30 years, glanced into the rearview mirror, his expression troubled. That was Folake Bankole's car, sir, the driver said quietly. Dr. Sanusi said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the young woman who was now trying to wring out the hem of her ruined top with trembling hands. He saw the subtle tremor in her fingers, saw her shoulders slump in a small private gesture of defeat. In that moment, he wasn't just seeing a cleaner. He was seeing the ghost of his nephew, Kalu. The same charm, the same ambition, and the same terrifying void where a conscience should have been. He had ignored the warning signs with his nephew, and the rot had spread until it had poisoned everything. He would not make that mistake again. The elder put his glasses back on, his face a mask of cold resolve. The girl finally started moving, walking towards the tower entrance with her head down. Dr. Sanusi reached for his phone. He did not raise his voice or betray a single trace of emotion. He made a call to his personal assistant at the Umoja Foundation. Bola, he said, his voice level and quiet. Are you at your desk? Yes, Chairman. Good morning, sir. The preliminary candidate file for the Humanitarian Award. The one on the bankroll, woman. Yes, sir. It's right here. The committee was very impressed by her submission. The chairman watched the last of the white vehicle disappear around a corner. Shred it. The orchids were returned. They arrived back at the Aura by Folake headquarters the next morning, delivered by a silent courier with a simple unsigned note that read, "The Foundation does not accept gifts." Folake stared at the extravagant spray of white flowers, now sitting awkwardly in her reception area like a funeral wreath. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. This was not part of the plan. Dr. Sanusi was an old man from a different era. A grand gesture like this should have charmed him, not created a problem. "What does this mean?" she demanded, her voice dangerously quiet. Her assistant Amara stood beside her, wringing her hands. I don't know, ma'am. It's highly unusual." "Get him on the phone," the mogul snapped, turning on her heel and marching back towards her glass-walled office. "I want to speak to him directly, now." She spent the next hour pacing her office, the city of Akani sprawling beneath her like a conquered territory. Her calls to the chairman's direct line went straight to his assistant, Bola, whose voice was a fortress of polite, impenetrable excuses. "Dr. Sanusi is in a board meeting. He is reviewing documents and cannot be disturbed. The chairman has stepped out for the rest of the day." With each rejection, the knot in Folake's stomach pulled tighter. Something was wrong. This wasn't just a scheduling issue, this was a wall, a deliberate silent barrier being erected between her and the Umoja Foundation. Her mind raced, cycling through a list of her rivals. Was it Adekunle from the oil sector? Or that woman from the telecoms giant? Someone was sabotaging her. Someone was whispering poison into the old man's ear. It was the only explanation. She stabbed at her phone, calling her head of corporate intelligence. "Dig into every other finalist for the Umoja Award," she commanded. "I want to know who they're talking to, who they're meeting with. Find the leak." The businesswoman never once thought about the mud. She never once considered the girl in the beige uniform. The incident had been completely erased from her memory, a trivial annoyance overwritten by the day's more important battles. Down in the concrete bowels of the Echo Pearl Tower, Chidinma stood before her supervisor, Mr. Kalu. The stench of damp earth still clung to her, even after she had spent an hour scrubbing the uniform in a utility sink. The stain, a ghostly brown shadow, remained. Mr. Kalu, a man whose small authority was his greatest treasure, pointed a fat finger at the mark on her chest. "This is a disgrace," he said, his voice echoing in the sterile hallway. "We are responsible for the image of this building. How can you present yourself to our clients looking like this?" Chidinma stared at a point on the wall just past his ear. "It was an accident, sir. A car? I don't want excuses," he boomed. "I want professionalism. This is your first and only warning, Okoro. One more infraction, and you will be terminated. And the cost of a new uniform will be deducted from your final pay." He dismissed her with a wave. The young woman turned and walked away, her face a blank mask. But inside, the panic was a frantic drumbeat. Fired. The word was a death sentence for her brother. Her friend Zainab met her by the cleaning supply closet. Zainab was older, more cynical, and had seen it all. She leaned against a mop bucket, chewing on a stick of gum. "Don't mind him," the coworker said, her voice low. "His wife probably denied him his morning pounded yam." She looked at Chidinma's strained face. "Was it that bad? He said he would fire me." The cleaner's voice was barely a whisper. Zainab's expression hardened. "See? Their world is not for us. They step on ants and never look back. Just keep your head down, Chidi. That's how we survive. Become invisible." For the rest of the week, that's what she did. The young woman moved through the gleaming halls of the tower like a ghost, her work efficient, her presence unfelt. Every splash of a passing car made her flinch. Every expensive suit that brushed past her made her hold her breath. Meanwhile, Folek's world was cracking. Her final confirmation meeting with the Umoja board, scheduled for Friday, was cancelled, not postponed. The email was brief, cold, and offered no explanation. The mogul threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall with a sickening crack and slid to the floor. "No!" she screamed, the sound swallowed by the thick carpet. She rounded on Amara, who flinched back. "This is your fault!" Folake's voice was a venomous hiss. "Your incompetence has cost me everything." "Ma'am, I don't know what happened. I tried." "You're fired," the CEO said, her voice suddenly flat and dead. Get out. Get out of my building. Amara stared at her, her face crumbling in disbelief before turning and fleeing. The cosmetics tycoon sank into her leather chair, her hands shaking. It was over. She had lost. She didn't know how or why, but the door to her legacy had been slammed shut and locked. The silence from the Umoja Foundation was now a screaming void. A week later, a plain, unmarked envelope arrived at the main office of the cleaning services company that managed the Echo Pearl Tower contract. It wasn't addressed to the company or to Mr. Kalu. The name on the front was typed in neat black letters. Ms. Chidinma Okoro. Her supervisor stared at it with suspicion before shouting for the cleaner to come to his office. He thrust it at her as if it were contaminated. What is this? Are you in some kind of trouble? Chidinma took the envelope, her heart pounding. Her hands were unsteady as she tore it open. Inside was a single thick card of a quality she had never felt before. At the top was an embossed logo, two hands clasped around a baobab tree. The Umoja Foundation. Her eyes scanned the printed words, her brain struggling to process them. The chairman and board of the Umoja Foundation request the pleasure of your company, annual humanitarian gala, as a special guest of the foundation. Jide parked the black Mercedes a discreet distance from the crowded market where the cleaners from the Echo Pearl Tower bought their lunch. He was a man built for waiting, for observing. For 3 days, he had watched Chidinma Okoro. He saw her share her small portion of fried plantain with a younger, struggling co-worker. He noticed her meticulously count her coins before buying a single orange. He observed her pull out a small, cracked photograph from her pocket, her expression softening for just a moment before she tucked it away again. The driver reported all of this back to Dr. Sanusi. The girl is quiet, sir, Jide explained as they drove through the city. She keeps to herself. The other workers respect her. They say she sends every spare naira she has back to her village. Her younger brother is sick. The chairman sat in the back, listening, his fingers steepled before him. What kind of sick? Something with the blood, they said. It requires expensive treatments, Dr. Sanusi nodded slowly. The information settled into place, cementing his resolve. This girl was not just a random victim. She was a symbol of the quiet, resilient dignity he felt the world had forgotten. The dignity his own nephew had mocked. The plan will proceed, the elder said, his voice firm. Jide gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. He had served the chairman for 3 decades, a position that granted him the rare privilege of speaking his mind. Sir, with respect, he began, choosing his words with care. To bring this girl to the gala, to put her in the same room as Folake Bankole, it is a cruel stage. Are we sure this is justice and not just revenge for what Kalu did? The name hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken for years. The chairman turned to look out the window, his reflection a pale mask against the passing city. Kalu's failure was my own. I gave power to a man who lacked character. I will not make that mistake again. The foundation is not a prize to be won by the most ruthless. It is a sacred trust. Sometimes a lesson must be made public to be truly learned. His voice was calm, but the driver could hear the steel beneath it. The decision was made. The old man was on a crusade, and Jide knew better than to stand in his way. Back in the fluorescent-lit break room of the Echo Pearl Tower, Chidinma stared at the thick, cream-colored invitation. It felt alien in her hands, like an object from another planet. This is a trap, Zainab hissed, peering over her shoulder. She snatched the card and read it, her eyes wide with disbelief. A special guest? Chidi, what have you done? Nothing. The younger woman's voice trembled. I have done nothing. Exactly. Zainab jabbed a finger at the card. People like us don't get invited to places like this unless they want something. They will make a fool of you. It's a game. Rich people's games are not for us. They will chew you up and spit you out. Fear, cold and sharp, coiled in Chidinma's gut. Her friend was right. It had to be a mistake. A cruel joke. Her mind flashed back to the wave of mud, the laughing roar of the engine. Maybe the woman in the car was someone important from this foundation. Maybe this was some new, elaborate way to humiliate her. Her supervisor, Mr. Kalu, swaggered over, drawn by their hushed, frantic conversation. What is that? He demanded, snatching the invitation from Zainab. He read it, his eyebrows shooting up to his hairline. The Umoja Foundation Gala. He looked at the young cleaner with a new, unsettling mix of suspicion and awe. Who are you? He asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Nobody," she whispered, reaching for the card. She took it and fled the break room, her heart hammering against her ribs. All afternoon she felt the eyes of her co-workers on her. The whispers followed her down the long, gleaming corridors. Chidinma Okoro, the Umoja Foundation. She was no longer invisible. That night, in her small, single room, she sat on the edge of her bed, the invitation lying on her pillow. It seemed to glow in the dim light. Her first instinct was to tear it into 1,000 pieces, to throw it away and pretend it never happened, to retreat back into the safety of her anonymity. She could just not show up. They would forget about her. Life would go back to normal. She would keep her head down, finish her work, and send money home for Emeka. That was the plan. The only plan. But then she looked at the faint brown stain on her uniform, which was hanging on the back of her door. It was a badge of her humiliation, a reminder of how small and powerless she had been in that moment. A spark of something new and unfamiliar flickered inside her. It wasn't anger. It was a hot, stubborn wire of defiance. She had been treated like dirt, like an ant, like she was nothing. This invitation, whatever it was, a trick, a mistake, a game, was a door into their world. The world of the woman in the white G-Wagon. Her fear was still there, a cold stone in her stomach. But for the first time, another feeling pushed against it. The need to stand up, to not be defined by that moment in the mud. She picked up the invitation. Her hands were steady now. She would go. The cleaner didn't know what would happen. She didn't know what they wanted. But she would walk through that door with her head held high. She would not go as their pawn or their victim. She would go as Chidinma Okoro. And she would face whatever and whoever was waiting for her on the other side. The next day, a black car, the same one that had been watching her, pulled up outside the Echo Pearl Tower. Jide got out. He did not approach her supervisor. He walked directly to the young woman as she was leaving for the day. "Miss Chidinma Okoro?" he asked, his voice respectful. She froze, her hand clutching her bag. "My name is Jide. I am from the Umoja Foundation," the driver said calmly. "Dr. Sanusi has arranged for a dress fitting for you for the gala and for transportation. If you will please come with me." The grand ballroom of the Akani Continental Hotel was a galaxy of shimmering lights and quiet power. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of men in sharp tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than Chidinma earned in a year. The air hummed with expensive perfume and the low murmur of 1,000 discreet conversations. The cleaner stood just inside the entrance, clutching a small borrowed purse. The dress the foundation had provided was simple, a deep midnight blue that fell to her ankles, but it was made of a fabric so soft it felt like water against her skin. Still, she felt like an imposter, a crow in a flock of peacocks. Jide had dropped her off at the main entrance with a simple instruction. "The chairman will know you are here. Just find a quiet place and wait." Every head that turned in her direction made her skin prickle. She found a small, empty space near a pillar, hoping the shadows would swallow her. Her heart beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. What was she doing here? Zainab's warnings echoed in her head. "They will chew you up and spit you out." Across the room, Folake Bankole was holding court. Dressed in a severe, stunningly elegant white gown that made her look like a queen carved from ice, she was in her element. The strange silence from the foundation had unnerved her, but here, in this room, surrounded by the city's elite, her confidence surged back. The whispers she heard were not of scandal, but of admiration. "Folake, you look absolutely breathtaking." Aura by Folake is a national treasure. The award is surely yours. She accepted the compliments with a practiced, radiant smile. This was her night. Her coronation. The last few weeks had been a test, a strange maneuver by the old man, but she had weathered it. She was here and she was winning. Her eyes scanned the crowd, cataloging the powerful faces, the allies and the rivals. And then her gaze landed on the girl by the pillar. The mogul's smile tightened. She saw a plain girl in a simple dress looking lost and out of place. She recognized the face, not from the street, not from the mud, but from the general pool of anonymous service workers she saw every day. A cleaner, a waitress. It didn't matter. She was insignificant, but she was here, mingling, in the main ballroom. Folake's mood, so bright moments before, curdled into irritation, the nerve of some people. The standards of the hotel's staffing agency were clearly slipping. Dr. Sanusi stood in a quiet, elevated alcove overlooking the entire ballroom. He was not mingling. He was watching. He saw the businesswoman, a shark gliding through shimmering water. He saw Chidinma, a small still ship in a turbulent sea. He saw the exact moment the tycoon's eyes locked onto the girl. He watched her expression shift from triumph to annoyance. The final piece of his plan was about to fall into place. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod to one of the Foundation's board members standing nearby, a formidable woman named Chief Adawale. Folake began to move, gliding through the crowd with purpose. A few of her associates followed in her wake, curious. She was headed directly for the cleaner. Chidinma saw her coming. Her breath caught in her throat. It was her, the woman from the white G-Wagon. The face was unmistakable, no longer a fleeting profile behind tinted glass, but sharp and clear and aimed right at her. The blood drained from the cleaner's face. This was it. The trap. It was all about the woman. She was going to be humiliated in front of all these people. She wanted to run, to disappear, but her feet were rooted to the plush carpet. The mogul stopped a few feet from her, her expression one of utter contempt. She didn't even speak to the young woman directly. She turned to the man standing beside her, a banking executive. The quality of service really is declining everywhere, isn't it? Folake's voice was pitched just loud enough for those nearby to hear. It dripped with disdain. She then fixed her cold eyes on Chidinma. "I believe the help is supposed to use the back entrance," she said, her voice like the flick of a whip. She didn't wait for a response. She simply gave the younger woman a dismissive wave, a gesture one might use on a fly. "Know your place." Then she turned her back, a final brutal act of erasure, and swept away, leaving Chidinma standing alone in a pocket of stunned silence. The people who had overheard the exchange shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged shocked glances. Chief Adawale, the board member, stood nearby, her face a stony mask. She had seen and heard everything. The cleaner's face was burning. The public nature of the insult was 1,000 times worse than the cold splash of mud. She could feel the stares, the pity, the judgment. Tears pricked at her eyes, hot and sharp, but she refused to let them fall. She lifted her chin, her knuckles white where she gripped her small purse. She had made a choice to be here. She would not let this woman break her. From his vantage point, Dr. Sanusi watched it all unfold. He saw the public dismissal. He saw the ripples of shock move through the nearby crowd. He saw the tycoon's arrogant turn. And he saw Chidinma's quiet, defiant stand. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was time. Folake Bankole had just publicly and irrevocably sealed her own fate. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd as a single spotlight illuminated the grand stage. The host's voice boomed through the speakers, announcing the final, most prestigious award of the evening. And now, to present the Umoja Foundation's Humanitarian of the Year, please welcome our esteemed chairman, Dr. Adebayo Sanusi. A wave of applause swept through the room. Folake stood near the front, her face a mask of triumphant anticipation. Her heart pounded. This was her moment, the culmination of everything. She smoothed down the front of her white gown, ready for her victory walk. Dr. Sanusi walked slowly to the podium. He did not smile. He adjusted the microphone, his old eyes scanning the sea of expectant faces. He let the silence stretch, building the tension until it was a tangible thing. "Good evening," he began, his voice quiet but resonant, carrying to every corner of the room. "We are here tonight to celebrate character. We honor those who build, who innovate, who lead. But I have learned through painful experience that a person's true character is not measured in the boardroom." The businesswoman's smile was fixed in place. She nodded along, a picture of grace. "It is not measured by the profit margin or the market share," the chairman continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "It is measured in the small moments, the ones that happen in the shadows when we think no one is watching." He paused, taking off his spectacles and polishing them with his silk cloth. The room was utterly silent. "I once mentored a brilliant young man," the elder said, his voice laced with a deep ancient sadness. "He had all the gifts: charm, ambition, intelligence. He built an empire, and I championed him. But I was blind to the corrosion in his soul. I celebrated his success and I ignored his character, a mistake that brought ruin to many and a shame to my own house." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. This was not the expected celebratory speech. Folake's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "I see that same blindness in our world today," Dr. Sanusi went on, his voice gaining strength. We celebrate the beautiful facade and we ignore the foundation. We are dazzled by the luxury car and we do not see the person standing in its path. His eyes found the CEO in the crowd. They were no longer the kind, academic eyes of a revered elder. They were the eyes of a judge. I witnessed an incident not long ago, on a rainy Akani afternoon. A luxury SUV, white as a wedding dress, and an act of casual, needless cruelty. A worker, drenched in mud, left standing in the street, their dignity stolen for a moment of impatient sport. Folake's blood ran cold. The smile on her face froze, a grotesque plaster mask. The room, the lights, the faces around her seemed to warp and distort. The memory, so thoroughly erased, came flooding back with sickening clarity. The splash. The girl. The beige uniform. The person in that vehicle, the chairman's voice boomed, was a candidate for the award I hold in my hand tonight. A collective gasp went through the ballroom. Phones previously hidden began to emerge. Tiny red recording lights blinked to life in the darkness. Every eye in the room swiveled from Dr. Sanusi to the mogul who stood paralyzed, her face a deathly white against her gown. This foundation does not reward cruelty, he declared. It does not celebrate arrogance. It will not honor those who show grace only to the powerful and contempt for the unseen. He looked past the businesswoman, his eyes searching the back of the room. The true humanitarian spirit was not in that SUV. The true strength of character was not in the driver's seat. It was standing in the mud, drenched and humiliated, yet choosing to carry on with quiet dignity. Miss Chidinma Okoro, would you please stand? A second spotlight cut through the darkness, finding the cleaner by her pillar. It bathed her in a brilliant, terrifying light. She felt 1,000 pairs of eyes on her. She stood frozen, her heart a wild bird trapped in her chest. Then she saw Dr. Sanusi looking at her, a silent, clear instruction in his eyes. Slowly she straightened her shoulders. She lifted her chin. She stood tall. The entire room turned, a great rustling beast, to look at her, this unknown girl in a simple blue dress. Then they turned back to the horrified, exposed Folake. The whispers started quiet at first, then growing into a tidal wave of scandal. The award this year, the chairman announced, his voice ringing with finality, goes to a true builder, a woman who has quietly dedicated her life to educating children in the forgotten corners of our nation, Dr. Amina Bello. The applause for the surprise, genuine winner was thunderous, but it was drowned out by the storm of whispers and the frantic clicking of phones aimed at the mogul. Her world had collapsed in a public execution. She turned, her face a mask of fury and shame, and fled, pushing through the crowd as flashes went off around her like lightning. The CEO didn't stop until she was in the back of her G-Wagon, the doors locked. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, but her eyes were dry and burning with a cold, hard rage. She snatched her phone. "Get me my PR team," she snarled into the device. "Now." Her voice was a raw, jagged thing. "This is a war. He's a bitter old man with a vendetta against a successful woman. Spin it. We release a statement tonight. The girl is an opportunist. We fight back." Back in the ballroom, the crowd had surrounded the other winner. Chidinma stood alone, the spotlight having moved off her. The noise of the party faded to a dull roar. A moment later, Dr. Sanusi was beside her, his expression now gentle. Jide stood respectfully behind him. "Miss Okoro," the old man said, "you have shown more character tonight than many in this room possess in a lifetime." He gestured to his driver, who stepped forward and handed her an envelope. It was not a trophy. It was not a cash prize. "The Umoja Foundation would like to establish a full, permanent fund for your brother's medical care," the chairman said quietly. Chidinma's knees felt weak. A wave of relief so powerful it almost brought her to the ground washed over her. "But," the elder continued, his eyes serious, "it comes with a request. We are launching a new initiative for workplace dignity, a program to protect the rights of the unseen workers of this city. We need a voice, a face. We need you." The cleaner stared at him, the heavy envelope in her hand. The roaring in her ears was not the party anymore. It was the sound of her life splitting in two. The simple, anonymous life she knew and a new, terrifying public one being offered to her. Her victory was real. Her brother was safe. But her quiet world, the only one she had ever known, was gone forever.